Sawyer did this week. It was perfect. It was like, this is what I'm talking about. He's kind of awake, kind of asleep. We've all been there, just that shaken awake. When I was in high school, my brother and I didn't get along, which is probably shocking for most of you to hear. And so, like any good brother, I would play pranks on him whenever the mood struck me, which happened quite often. The mood struck very often. And one night I get home, it's Friday night, it's about 11-ish, everyone's in bed, and I see my brother and the mood struck. And I went, oh yeah, I got this. And I walk in, hey Tyler, you gotta wake up. You gotta wake up, mom's running late, you gotta get ready for school. So he gets up and zombies his way, gets his school uniform on, does his thing he does every morning, and goes to the kitchen table and just sits there waiting for breakfast. He does it for a couple minutes. And then eventually, I don't know if he realized it or he just got tired of waiting, he went back to bed, and I would have got away with it had the next morning he had not come to the same kitchen table with his school uniform on a Saturday, and my mom be like, what? Why did you choose to wear school clothes on a Saturday? Almost. I say that because we kind of go through parts of our life, especially our spiritual aspects of life, asleep. Just kind of going through the motions. Just going through it. We know what we're doing, kind of, but we're not really thinking about what we're doing. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about what Paul wrote to Ephesus in Ephesus 5:13. The Apostle Paul had some concerns for the church at Ephesus, and his concern is that Christians, not non-believers, Christians had fallen asleep. Okay, that despite knowing what they knew and seeing all the power and all the miracles that they had seen just about 12, 15 years prior, they fell asleep. So he writes in Ephesians 5:13 and 15, but their evil intentions will be exposed when the light shines on them. For the light makes everything visible. That is why it is said, awake, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. So let's talk about Ephesus. Let's talk about what was going on there in the first place. Ephesus was a major city. It was a giant economic hub for the Roman Empire. And it was situated where it was called the Gateway of Asia. So all the people and commerce coming through from Asia through to the Roman Empire would pass through Ephesus, and vice versa, the Roman Empire into Asia through Ephesus. So it was a happening place. It also was a mecca for pagan worship. So the Temple of Artemis was there. And the Temple of Artemis was one of the 7 wonders of the world. So already you need to expand what you're thinking on how big it is and multiply that. It would have been massive. And it would have been a huge attraction, a huge place for this city. And it was a place where idol worship's happening, prostitution, and just debauchery on all sorts of levels. And this is where Paul goes to do this ministry, and he spends one of his longest ministries here in Ephesus, 3 years. And he brought his dream team. He brought Priscilla and Aquila. Then later he sent his prized pupil, Timothy, to this place. And while he was there, incredible things happened. In Acts 19, 11 and 12, we read, God did powerful, extraordinary miracles through the hands of Paul, so that when handkerchiefs or aprons that had touched his flesh were brought to the sick, their diseases left them and the evil spirits came out of them. I recall someone who touched the hem of a person's garment and was completely healed. When that was with Jesus. This would have been incredible. Paul was doing a work in this minute. He is sending shockwaves through Ephesus. The gospel slams into this city and just washes over it. So much so that it completely disrupts an entire industry. The blacksmiths who made idols for this 7 wonder of the world Temple of Artemis, people stopped buying them. Guess what? All these Christians were like, I'm going to turn away from that. I'm not supporting this anymore. I'm giving my life to Christ. Guess what? They didn't like that. They caused a massive riot. But I just want to say, can you imagine today the gospel just slamming into a city? a state, a country, a continent so immensely that the entire socioeconomic system starts coming down, we're talking some incredibly powerful stuff. This is how this church begins. This is how this church begins. And 15 years later, Paul is concerned. Why? Because they're being lulled to sleep. They've made these radical changes. They flipped an entire city on its head. And now they're drifting off to sleep. So there's two kinds of parents in my experience when it comes to waking up kids. There's the first one, comes in, clicks on the light. Hey, sweet prince, scratches a back. It's time to wake up. It's time to start your day. And then there's me. I'm kicking down the door. The lights are on. It's like I set my alarm for PM instead of AM. Let's go, let's go, let's go. We got somewhere to be. I don't want to be late again and have the secretary of the front office side-eye me for being tardy. Paul is telling them to wake up. Wake up. Let's go. Rise up from the dead, and Christ will give you life. He equates their sleep to death. He's saying this is a matter of life and death. Don't just stumble your way into the morning. Rise up. And that warning is just as much true today as it was for the church in Ephesus. And I want to look at 3 different ways that we see people being lulled to sleep in our society, in our culture. The first one I would call the anesthesia of deceit. The second one is rootlessness. And then the last one would be a good old-fashioned chokeout. We'll start with deceit. Sin in and of itself is deceitful. If allowed to gain a foothold in your life, it will slowly, it will subtly and gradually harden your heart. As I say that, you're probably thinking of maybe something that you struggled with where you're like, man, I didn't, but I let this slide, and then this slide, and then this slide, and eventually it is what it is. I'll give you an example. When I first started driving, I was Johnny Law. I was 2 miles on the speed limit, full stop, doing the, And then a little bit later, it's like, well, I'm going to go with the flow of traffic. Everyone's going 5-10 miles over. This is fine. Oh, we're going to do the California roll. Everyone's just cruising through. It saves gas and it saves the environment. I can rationalize it. And then pretty soon you're on the freeway going 80 miles an hour in the fast lane, and someone's going 75, and you're like, what is this guy doing? Doesn't he know that the fast lane is for people who want to truly break the law? And then people start to accuse you of having road rage, whatever that is. It's a gradual, subtle thing. I think of Samson and how at first he was deceiving Delilah. Samson is, when I read, I gotta be honest, he seems like your classic jock, your brawn over brains, okay? He is deceiving Delilah every time she asks him, hey, where do you get your strength from? I want to know, because she's trying to deceive him. But at the start, he's deceiving her. But what happens is Delilah literally flips this on its head, and she says this: how can you say, I love you, when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies. You can kind of hear that, like, that voice, that tone, that tenor. And when she pressed him hard, her words day after day after day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. Vexed to death, lulled to sleep by deception. Samson, one of the strongest men to ever live, was deceived by someone whom he thought had their best intentions, his best intentions at their heart. This led to his ultimate demise, not before being redeemed by God, but she accused Samson of not loving her. You don't love me. Today we'd say that's gaslighting. So she basically gaslit him. And what's happening is he's breathing in what she's saying to him and breathing it in and breathing it in, slower and slower and slower, breathing in the anesthesia of deceit until it became deadly. We have to wake up. And this was I got to be honest, this sermon was a little hard to write about because we're seeing this kind of thing here in America, in California especially. We're seeing this. Life is hard. I get it. I say that all the time. Life is hard. If you're tired of hearing me say that, I don't know, maybe I'll learn it in Greek, or I try to pretty it up. I don't know what. Life is going to be hard. I get that. But this is a long race we're running. And here's what happens when you're not careful. The slow whispers, the slow first breaths of deceit won't be a, hey, turn your back on God. It'll be, well, did God really have your best interest at heart there? Does he really know best? Is he holding out on you? Or if you really have love in your heart, you'll agree with this. Or this one, I'm sure you've heard this one. Well, God wants me to be happy. God wants me to be happy, so this is fine. Whatever it is that goes against what the Bible says, well, God, ultimately, he just wants me to be happy. It's the sin of deceit, and we breathe it in, and slower and slower and slower, it seeps into our hearts, and we just go, okay. And we find ourselves so far down the road, it's hard to wake up. Next, rootlessness. In the parable of the good soil, Matthew 13, 20 and 21, we read, the seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. Paging Ephesus, got you right here, right here. But since they had no root, they only last a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they fall away quickly. I heard recently that everybody in America, most people, they love new love and they love old love. New love. Two people fall in love. It's what every romantic comedy is ever about. They fall in love. One of them is lying. Maybe one of them is Santa Claus. I don't know. That's what Hallmark says. But they fall in love, and eventually the truth's going to come out. And maybe if we just started with the truth, we could end this movie an hour earlier. Just saying. But young love is that super dramatic. It's awesome. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect. It's kind of blah, but it's awesome. And then old love is the 80-year-olds holding hands who have made it through this long life, just wild and crazy about each other since the beginning. You know what nobody talks about? The middle stuff. No one talks about that. Well, because what happens a lot of times is young love runs into this, and it crashes, and it dies because it doesn't have roots. It doesn't have roots. You can see this play out with Ephesus. They were all about that young love. They heard the word and at once received it with joy. But then we read in Revelation 2 how far they truly fell. And it's a really sad situation. And I want to be honest, I learned this about Greek. You know me, I'm getting into that. Fall away at the end there, in Greek, that's to be offended. And what will happen, what we're saying here, what we're hearing is that you're going to start to blame God if you don't have roots. Why did God allow this to happen? It's God's fault. And you've fallen asleep that way. And you've slipped away. There has to be a commitment. You can't start a race and then halfway through go, I'm going to take a break. It's lunchtime. You guys keep going. Maybe I'll get back to this tomorrow, maybe next week. That's not how races work. Yet we see this happening over and over and over. You can build your life in the truth of Jesus and in his church, or you can build it on shallow emotions and platitudes, which are things like thoughts and prayers. Why do you think society's tired of hearing the phrase thoughts and prayers? Because it doesn't have any roots. They're not seeing the roots of that. Maybe you started out with joy when you were baptized or when you were in a good moment, vibing with the people you were with at church, but then something comes along. You didn't build roots during that time, just like the church at Ephesus. You lived off the emotions. Maybe you came to church Sunday, but then Monday through Saturday, you're asleep. Kind of like Sawyer, he's awake at Sunday, and then he's back to sleep Monday through Saturday, and it's Sunday, and then we're back asleep. And it's hard. C.S. Lewis said, relying on God must begin again every day as though nothing had been done before. Whew, that's heavy. That's heavy. I can't just say, you know what? I prayed yesterday. I'll be good. Maybe I'll pray tomorrow or the next day. I read my Bible, yesterday. I got through 2 chapters, so I don't read my Bible next week. I did good. I talked about Jesus that day. What we're doing essentially is saying, well, I'm going to be a Christian this day, but maybe not tomorrow. Something's going on, and I'm not going to be a Christian today. We have to change that mindset. You are not a doctor. You are a Christian who happens to be a doctor. You are not a stay-at-home mom. You are a Christian who happens to be a stay-at-home mom. You work for a video game company. You're not just that guy. You're a Christian who happens to be there. You don't take it off. Could you imagine having a job where you never wanted to take a day off? No vacations, no weekends, no breaks. Every day you were so on fire to do the work that every step and every moment, every decision had that purpose, had that burning desire. Can you imagine what that would feel like? And how you would change the world around you? The last one I want to talk about is a good old-fashioned choke out. I asked Noah if he wanted to be a part of this as so I can show you guys a sleeper hold, so you just have to imagine him just going to sleep, a good old choke out. He said no, obviously. This one we see a literal thing choking out the life, putting you to sleep. And in verse 22 of Matthew 13, the seed falling among the thorn refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. The first one's being deceived. It's God is not good. Don't you want me to be happy if you really love me? The second one we talked was about, not having deep roots, so we aren't able to withstand the trials and tribulations, the troubles that come with life to withstand that. This last one, Jesus is very specifically saying there's two things here that will put you to sleep: the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. The cares of this world are going to revolve around anxiety, worrying, uncertainties. We talked about just 2 weeks ago about one of the hardest things, one of the things that takes us away from being in the moment is worrying about the future and the uncertainties. Well, it's true. It's true. Life is going to be filled with uncertainty. We say life, death, and taxes are the three guarantees. You could probably add uncertainties to that. Anybody remember 2020? Anybody have big plans there? How'd that go? Life is filled with uncertainties. Jesus is saying that anxiety and uncertainty that is dwelled upon will choke you out, will put you to sleep. I have goals. I have plans. I have plans for me, for my family, for this church. But it's absolutely filled with uncertainties, but I don't dwell on that. Because Jesus says that will choke me out. And the other one is the deceitfulness of riches. It does not say riches. It's not saying that people who are rich are going to be choked out. It's saying the deceitfulness of riches. Okay? So in scriptures we have in the Old Testament, we have Job, who lost everything, but learned that all he needed was God. Then we have Solomon, who was given everything and learned that it was all vanity and worthless without God. Both examples are important here because you have the poor man who gets it in his head that he just had a little more of this, a little more money, a little more of time, whatever it is, then things would work out. This person forgets what the contemporary American scholar P. Diddy said when he said, "Mo money, mo problems." And then the deceitfulness of the riches for the rich has two major problems. The first is that it gives a false sense of confidence in the wealth that leaves them with hearts that aren't hungry for God. And the second is a false sense of control via their power and money, where they feel like they don't have to throw themselves on the mercy of God. They can just numb themselves by keeping busy, bearing their deepest needs to be in a close relationship with God. I just recently heard that, hey, if Satan can't make you bad, he's got to make you busy. If Satan can't make you bad and make you just flat out sin, then he's going to make you busy. He's going to drive a wedge between you and your walk and your relationship with God. Jesus said that the seed which falls on good soil refers to someone who hears and understands it, which leads them to producing a crop with a yield so much more than was sown. If you're not producing a crop, if you can't see God working in your life, then I'm going to echo Paul and say, wake up. Wake up, please. The sermon's probably been a little heavier than you're used to for me. I get that. I'll be honest. I make no apologies. I am what I am, which is Popeye, apparently, I guess. Here's what I want you guys to do this week. On each of the Lord's Supper tables and in the foyer, there is a sheet with these 9 questions on there. And I'm basically giving you homework. But I don't want you to turn it in. It's not for me. It's for you. These are questions that Tim Keller, a really famous evangelist who built a church in New York City, of all places, and that thrived there, came up with for people who are sleeping. Yes, take out your phones, take a picture of it. I love that. That's perfect. There are papers in the back. Please, before you ask any of these questions of yourself, quick prayer, dear God, let me be honest with this. Let me be honest with myself when I'm answering these questions. 9 questions, that's it. The only way you can fail this assignment is if you don't do it. That's it. You don't have to turn it back into me. I would love to. If you have great things that are going on in your life, please share it with me, with anybody. That would be fantastic. But ask these questions of yourself and get a stock of where are you at? Because what's at stake if you've fallen asleep? The Apostle Paul ends his quote by saying, Christ's light will shine on you. What's at stake? Light and life. That's why Jay sang that song this morning. Light and life and joy is he, the precious friend who died for me. John 1:4-5. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The cry to wake up is not punitive. It's not. It's not, how dare you have fallen asleep? That's not what I'm trying to do. And Jesus knew that. Jesus knew how hard it was. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he invited his 3 best friends to go with him and pray as he knew his impending death and sacrifice was just on the horizon. Matthew 26:40-41. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? I love this. He asked Peter. Peter is always getting singled out, that poor guy. But that's the human side. He's hurt that they fell asleep. But what does he say? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but it's the flesh that's weak. Jesus knows that it's hard. He gets it. And if you came to church today and you were like, man, this sermon kind of hit a little close to home, or I'm dreading answering those questions. Or maybe you're already sitting there and you're honest with yourself and you're like, yeah, I'm asleep. Maybe not every day, but there's days where I am just passed out and asleep. I just want to say that I love you guys. I love you guys so much. And I get it. I, way too many times in my life, just fell asleep. Jesus asked me to stay awake, pray with me. I just fell asleep. I'm awake now, though. I'm awake right now. And I am asking you, church, wake up. Please, wake up. There's a beautiful life and light with Christ waiting for you, but you have to wake up. Please come as we stand and sing.